coaches. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, they can't hold a flame against you, ay. Blow the whistle, blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, got the game, it ain't no issue, yeah. Blowing the whistle, I had enough with you, the championship, it is gone. Ain't listen to you, I can't give it to you, cause you don't know what I've been on. This is the Coaches Podcast.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the Fantasy Coaches Podcast. I am your host, as always, guys, Coach Steve. We are coming to you live at late night tonight. We got a later night show tonight, guys. I love it. Love a late night show there. You know, we get talk a lot more. Hopefully more people tune in tonight. A lot of fun there. So, guys, if you've been following us so far this April here, we are talking rookie prospects, draft prospects, whatever you want to call them here. Last week we did the running backs, and this week we get to do the quarterbacks. And obviously, the quarterbacks have a lot more, star power compared to what the running backs gave us last week. So let me introduce the crew as always. Coach Tyler, what's going on, brother?
What's up, guys? Every week that I'm on here is a week that we get closer to the Houston Texans winning the Super Bowl, and I think we'll talk about that a little bit today.
We might talk about that a little bit, but we'll see. And, of course, we have our guest on today's show, Dan Toomey. What is going on, Dan? Welcome back into the show.
Thank you for having me, guys. It's always a great time catching up with the coaches. I got little personal life stuff going on, so I haven't really been in the media scene. So it's good to get back into it. And, we're so close to the draft. It's the same month of the draft right now, it's crazy to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just can't wait for rookie draft season. I actually just did a rookie draft for one of my leagues. It was interesting. We might talk about some of those players that went drafted in this league here. But, yeah, we're talking quarterbacks today, guys. We're going to break down the top 10, 11 quarterbacks combined that we've had here. Most of the top seven's pretty much the same seven, but we each all have a different 8, 7, whatever you want to call it, at the very end we're going to talk about here. So let's not waste any more time. There's no NFL news we're going to talk about right now. I know I missed the Reese Rice situation last week, but we'll find out sure enough what happens with that situation when the time comes, and we'll break all that down at that time. So let's get into these quarterbacks here. Starting off at the top, the number one quarterback to a lot of people out there, Caleb Williams from USC here. Last season, he had a 68% completion percentage rating, 3,600 passing yards, 30 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and 11 rushing touchdowns, which was fun to see. Dan, I'll let you start off since you are our guest on the show here. How do you feel about Caleb Williams? Do you believe he is the top quarterback in this class?
Yeah, so he's the top quarterback without a doubt. I would say I have fun with Caleb because I feel like Caleb is one of the prospects that I have honestly scouted since he was a senior in high school. His acceptance into Oklahoma, him taking over for Spencer Rattler during his true freshman season, the comeback win against the University of Texas in the Red River rivalry game, and then the drama of leaving with Lincoln Riley and the whole coaching staff in the middle of the night off to USC. So I feel like Caleb is one of the first players that I've been so into scouting his entire career, including, like I said, 247 Sports, acceptance announcement to Oklahoma. And 2023 was not great for Caleb. He 2022, he won the Heisman Trophy. 2023, the team around him was not what it used to be. And we saw a lot of hero ball out of Caleb. And there's only so much hero ball that you can play before mistakes start to happen, before turnovers start to happen. And he got a lot of flack for it this year. But, I've been kind of writing down my final scouting notes for these prospects. We're entering the month of the draft. And this is what I have for Caleb. Caleb has all the tools to enter the elite tier of NFL quarterbacks. He has the arm talent, he has the awareness, and he has the mobility needed. He can make every Sunday throw on the field, and is elusive enough to give pass rushers fits. The main question I have for Caleb is he an elevator? You think of Patrick Mahomes, you think of Tom Brady, you think of the greats, of the years past. They elevate those around them. And I'm still waiting for Caleb to show that he is an elevator. 2023 was kind of his chance to do that. He had a very skeleton crew around him. No disrespect to, Jerry Rice's son out there. But 2023 was his chance to go out there and show that he is an elevator, and we just didn't see it. Now, does that mean he can't? No, it just means it hasn't happened yet. So I think Caleb will be a 10-plus year starter when he can take a step forward eventually. Until then, he will have to have a positive supporting cast around him. And, the crux of this conversation is the Chicago Bears, the number 1 overall draft pick. And we've seen the Bears put a very, very good supporting cast around what is assumed to be Caleb Williams' starting quarterback spot. So I am very, very excited to see Caleb at the next level. I know there's been a lot of slander, a lot of hate the past couple months on, his commitment to the game and personal stuff. And everything I've read of people who've actually been around Caleb and have talked to him, known him, says he is so passionate for the game of football. So I'm not doubting it. Nobody else should doubt it. He's locked in, number 1 overall pick. You want to talk about fantasy football? He's your 101 in Superflex leagues. Slam dunk. No questions asked.
Slam dunk move. I like that. Coach Tyler, how do you feel about Caleb Williams? Do you feel very similar to Dan, or do you have a different opinion on it?
Yeah, no, I feel very similar to Dan. I think he's the unrivaled number 1 in this draft, whether it be rookie draft or NFL draft. One thing I really like to see that we kind of talked about with running backs last week was I like to see how the media in the mock drafts begin to progress these guys as the offseason goes on. So going into the year and coming out of the season, Caleb Williams was the undoubted 101 in the NFL draft, whether it was the Bears or they kept Justin Fields and traded off, whatever it would be Caleb Williams. And while there's been a lot of discourse over who would be the quarterback 2 or 3 of this draft with some guys that we're going to get into, Caleb Williams had stayed solidified at that number 1 spot. He's a guy, I went to Texas Tech. I'm a Big 12 guy. So I remember watching very vividly that Red Rivalry game where he came in and ended up winning it. The only thing I hate more than the University of Oklahoma is the University of Texas. So I remember very vividly him becoming who we saw Caleb Williams to be in his early years. I remember seeing him go with Lincoln Riley. And I mean, last year he did have to play a lot of hero ball, and by what some people would consider was a down year from him, his down year was still 3,600 passing yards and 30 touchdowns at the collegiate level. Like, most quarterbacks are trying to have that kind of year or better to earn a spot as one of the top quarterbacks drafted. So, coming off of his Heisman campaign, it's not what we wanted to see in terms of that elevation, but it's still a fantastic year for him, and we add in the multiple years of double-digit rushing touchdowns. We see a little bit of that elusiveness. There's a little bit more that I want to see from him in terms of how he handles his progressions. Obviously, like Dan talked about, different cast than what he had last year, a little bit less skilled as opposed to some guys, and then a little bit younger with guys like Zachariah Branch. But Caleb Williams can go out there. The media is going to try and drive all these narratives to either push him up or push him down boards like we've seen with every top quarterback going in the draft. But everything that I've seen from him as a player, and then everything I've seen from what scouts and people that know sources inside the league are saying is that, he's the undoubted number 1. And if the people that are getting paid the big bucks are viewing him this way and have viewed him this way for years, then who am I to view any different than that? So I mean, he's locked in number 1 to Chicago Bears. Dan kind of hinted at the team that they put around him, sort of elevated that offense to where they couldn't put weapons around Justin Fields, and then they get Caleb Williams and they start to spend all this money and do all these trades. But he's going into a fairly good situation considering he's going to be the number 1 overall pick, which is something we don't always see. He's going to have the receivers. He's going to have the time to continue to progress and catch up to the speed of the game. But he has been a high caliber player at the collegiate level. And I think that everything solidifying him at 101 from the league is all that I need to have him as my quarterback 1 in the draft.
I like it. Thank God I don't get paid to scout, because I really do have him as my QB2 in the class, to be honest. But when fantasy season comes, he's going to be the QB1. Because he's just in such a great situation. If obviously he's going to end up in Chicago. Again, there's a lot of great things about him. He's got basically almost every skill possible that you want in an NFL quarterback. And the Bears are going to get themselves a heck of a player here. Some things that I still want to see hopefully get cleaned up at the next level is decision-making. I know that, the hero ball you guys both mentioned played obviously a factor this season there, but just sometimes he just tries to force the ball too much and makes bad decisions. And I'm hoping that doesn't carry off to the next level there. Something to do with pressure situations. Also, when I watched a lot on that on film, he seemed to kind of panic a little too much and then try to do a little too much with his decision making, and that kind of made his decision making kind of questionable for me personally. And I'm hoping that he can kind of clean that up at the NFL level there and look a little bit more to what he's given, and hopefully a better, obviously, supporting cast around him obviously will hopefully help that situation there. But these are just some things I found on film that I was a little like, okay, like, why are you doing that? Why are you making this throw there? There's no reason for that. There's throws that he could have just ran out, throw the ball out of bounds, but he tries to throw the ball across his body, something that Pat Mahomes does very well. And the ball ends up being batted down, or in the very, very rare situations, getting picked. And little things like that, you know, it's just something that I'm going to keep my eye on for him. But overall, I mean, Caleb Williams, I mean, you guys said it there. I mean, obviously, everyone in the world believes he's the number one quarterback in this draft, and he has literally all the talent to actually be that. So Caleb Williams, I like him. He's just my number 2 in the class. But again, no one pays me to scout, so that's my own personal opinion on that.
Can we go into some of the stuff for a quick second before we move on?
Yeah, sure, go for it.
Because I want to address the turnover worthy plays under pressure type of thing.
It's fair.
There is just one stat that I love to bring up.
I like it.
And if you look at the USC defense last year, do you know how many times they held an opponent under 34 points?
Want to say one?
Twice.
Three times.
Okay.
3 times. So the turnovers are simply because the defense was so bad that if he was off the field and the offense was off the field, it was almost a guaranteed 7 going the other way. Like, you know, yes, there's a mentality with, like, you know, playing from behind and like, oh, my defense isn't that good and I have to go out there, I have to make plays. But like, this is next level. Like, literally, if the offense is on the field, tack on 7 points for the other team. Like, an interception was not the worst outcome for Caleb in a lot of those instances. The worst outcome was a turnover on downs, you know, and then giving the other team the ball because they're going to go out there and score. So, you know, I know this narrative is out there a lot, like, oh, like, he made bad decisions all year. Under pressure, he made bad decisions all year. Like, I got news for you. His offensive line was terrible.
Yes.
You know,
correct.
if he wasn't as mobile as he is, he would be under pressure way more than he was. And the turnover stuff is just because simply he had no choice. You know, he had no choice but to try to make a play because going to the bench was accepting defeat to Caleb. And I think, you know, I work in a restaurant, you know, so I get home late on Fridays. I get home late on Saturdays. So, you know, Pac-12 is my jam. You know, Pac-12 after dark, start kickoffs at, or, you know, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. That's what I'm watching live college football. And, you know, I watched a lot of USC games last year, and, you know, the box score says one thing, but you actually watch that game and you watch like his demeanor and the whole offense's demeanor out there. The second they're walking up the field, they're like, oh, all right, that's game over. You know, every game had to be a shootout. So that is, I just kind of always rebuttal when people talk about Caleb and his turnover worthy plays and stuff like that in 2023. Because if you go back and look at in 2022, and way less turnover worthy plays, and that's when he had a very good offensive line in front of him, a very good supporting cast, you know. So it's just, I always like to bring that up when people talk about the turnovers and everything like that.
And I think that jumping into, like, because I remember the big shocker was, as people were putting out their comparisons, the first comparison for Caleb Williams was Patrick Mahomes. And you look at, obviously we know what Patrick Mahomes is now, and we're like, there's no way that Caleb Williams is this guy. But if you look back to what Patrick Mahomes was going into the draft, coming out of Texas Tech, he was on a team very similar to what that USC team was. You know, I think of the Texas Tech versus OU game where Baker and Patrick Mahomes combined for like 1,500 total yards, right?
I still watch that game once a year, by the way.
It is a fantastic game, and it's one of my favorite stats to look at. But you look at it, and he had to be that guy, and he had to sort of force the ball sometimes, because if he didn't take the risk and hopefully get the reward of it, he had no other opportunity to win the game. And so he put himself, or USC's defense put him in a position where he had to almost force it, because if he didn't, then no one else was going to win the game. And that's where, him and Mahomes, there's a little bit of similarities when you watch the college film, but I think coming in, Williams is a little bit more polished. Obviously, we know what the maturity of Mahomes has looked like over the past couple of years. He obviously ended up in a fantastic situation under Andy Reid with that Chiefs organization. And, I don't know if I can say that the Bears are the same kind of organization as that, but, we see, it was something that kind of took me back too. But then when I sit down and I watch games like that Tech OU game where they're combining for 1,500 yards, they combined for 1,500 yards because Mahomes was playing lights out, but he had to because the defense gave up, 6 or 7 touchdowns to Baker Mayfield alone. And then you had running backs coming in and doing their thing, and they ended up losing the game. And it's, Patrick Mahomes has the record for like the most total yards and touchdowns accounted for in a game, but that didn't matter because his defense wasn't there. And so I see that with Caleb Williams a little bit. The defense wasn't there, and that was the big joke for USC was, Caleb Williams could be Caleb Williams and who he was in his Heisman campaign, but he could do that every game for the rest of his life. But if he has the defense that he had, he's not going to be able to sort of sit back in the pocket and be able to make better decisions because at some point he has to force it. But I think that that's something that hopefully the Bears are able to improve on as opposed to what USC did.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Don't get me wrong. I like Caleb Williams a lot. I really do. But I gotta give some negatives. I gotta see what you guys are doing a little bit and feed off it the other way. Just play devil's advocate a little bit with you guys. I like that you guys rebutted to it, which is fantastic. People need to hear the negative side of things. You're like, whoa, wait. This is why you have that negativity there. So I like that, Dan and Tyler. I like that you guys rebutted my argument there. So I love that. All right, so let's get over to the
now.
Next...
We got to see who we have number 1. Now you got
me
intrigued. Now I'm looking forward to this episode.
I have a thing for a certain quarterback, but we'll get to that. Next on the list here is Michael Penix Jr. from Washington. Last season, Michael Penix, 65% completion percentage, 4,900 passing yards, 36 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions, 3 rushing touchdowns. He is not my QB1, so this is not him. So, okay. Coach Tyler, I'll let you go first on this one. How do you feel about Michael Penix Jr.?
Yeah, if I go back and look at my rankings real quick, if I can pull them up, I'll kind of stall until I get that. Penix is a guy that I loved watching, especially in the offense that he was in. I have him as my quarterback 5. We've seen someone jump up into that top 4. I had him as my 4 going into the offseason. But, we've seen the production numbers. Obviously, we had the offense. Everyone got to see it on display in the college football playoff. Just the almost air raid passing ability that they had with some really stud receivers. But Michael Penix, at the time that the season starts, is going to be 24 years old. And the big thing for Michael Penix, outside of being a lefty, is just the amount of injuries that he's had. Like, it's not just like 1 or 2 major injuries. But I want to say all 4 years that he was at Indiana, he was knocked out with season-ending injuries, 2 ACLs, and then 2 shoulder injuries. I think they were separate shoulders. But the 4 years that he was at Indiana before he ended up in Washington, he had 4 season-ending injuries. And so for an older quarterback coming in with the injury history, it kind of scares me, especially with the fact that we don't know where he's going to go in the draft. He could work his way into the middle or late first round. He could be a second or third round guy, depending on where teams view him. Obviously, he has the ability to, air the ball out. If he goes into the right system and they just want to, have him throw it 50 times straight downfield, he could be great. But just the fact of his injury history and his age mixed with the lack of chance that he's going to walk into an offense that was as potent as the one that he had at Washington. I have him at 5. He's just right outside that boundary of the top 4 kind of, we have the tier of his own in Caleb Williams. Then we have that upper echelon with 2 to 4. And he's right outside that at 5 for me. But there's just too many compounding factors. He's a fun player to watch. You go back and watch his tape. He does a lot of things right. But there's just a lot of compounding factors that push him outside of that sort of high tier 2 for me. So I have him at my quarterback 5. And we'll see. Draft capital and landing position could obviously change that. But right now, just looking at everything that comes together for him, I have him sitting there at 5.
Yeah. In my pre-draft rookie draft that I just did, he actually went 107. I thought that was a bit of a shocker, but his value definitely can go as early as a mid-first to third-round pick here. So it's going to be interesting how much hype he gets as they get closer to the draft. But Dan, how do you feel about Penix? You know, do you like him? Do you dislike him? Is he someone in the middle for you?
Yeah, so I have in my final scouting report for Michael Penix written down, Michael Penix Jr. is a human jug machine. He can make every throw on the field and has one of the bigger arms in his class. Knocks on Michael Penix Jr. are age and playing at multiple schools. Then I wrote, spoiler alert, that is multiple top 5 quarterbacks in this draft class. It's a very recurring theme. You know, we'll get into it with Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels and all that, but he also has the injury concern on top of that. Now, one thing I also say is, you know, we all work in this, you know, amateur scouting space, and, you know, we grind film for hours and we listen to interviews. And the one thing we don't have access to, the teams do, is medicals, is medical reports. And I kind of write my scouting reports, I do my rankings, and I put like a little asterisk, like, you know, watch for news on medicals. And I don't know about you guys, but I haven't heard anything negative about Michael Penix Jr.'s medicals from anyone in the industry. And that is kind of a green flag. You know, we are down to the final 3 weeks before the draft. You know, pro days are coming to an end, and we haven't heard a single thing about, oh, Team A is moving Penix down their draft board due to XYZ. Oh, Team X is off of Penix because of his medicals. So I'm thinking we're starting to get to the point where the medicals aren't as big of a deal as we think they are. Now, listen, yes, they're bad, you know, but he's not the only player in this class with medical concerns. You know, UCLA edge rusher Latu Latu medically retired from the University of Washington at one point and had to transfer to UCLA just to get a doctor to put on the field. So for me, the medicals are seeming like they're closer to a green flag, which is putting Michael Penix into top 15 draft capital for me, because I think the one place that he does fit kind of perfectly is with Kevin O'Connell and the Minnesota Vikings. Like, I mean, obviously he's wearing purple now, but God, just keep the same jersey pretty much.
That's the hope.
But him with that arm in the offense that Kevin O'Connell runs, the Sean McVay offense, it just, wow. You know, like, picture what Matthew Stafford did with the Rams the past couple of years. Like, you would have shades of Matthew Stafford in Michael Penix Jr. So I can be extremely high on Michael Penix Jr. I think he's going to be a top 15 draft pick. And I think he's going to have success right away when he gets to the next level. You know, I quarterback rankings, I still haven't finalized them. Honestly, Penix can land anywhere from quarterback 3 to quarterback 5 for me. You know, that Jaden Daniels, Michael Penix, JJ McCarthy tier, it's like, God, it's like, pick your own flavor. Like, do you want the guy with mobility? You got the guy with the big arm, or you want the guy who's just oozing potential? You know, is what are you looking at of this draft class? I don't think Michael Penix makes it past pick 20. You know, is that the Raiders, the Broncos, the Vikings taking him, or is that a team trading up, you know, back into the first round to get him? That I don't know, but I love what Michael Penix Jr. has on display, and I think the medicals are kind of falling by the wayside as not a big deal. Now, are there other issues? Yes. You know, when you have 2 ACL injuries and you're a non-mobile quarterback to begin with, guess what? You're a statue in the pocket. You know, RPO is not going to be in the breadbasket of this offensive play caller, but we've seen quarterbacks have success with the lack of mobility. You know, goddamn, Tom Brady played till he was 48. You know, he had a walker out there and still threw for 45 touchdowns his last year. So I mean, as a passer, I love what Michael Penix Jr. does. Now, the other thing is, and we will talk about this with a couple other prospects as we go into this quarterback list, is how much elevation was he getting from his playmakers? Because, look at LSU, look at Oregon, and then look at Washington. We're talking about wide receivers, day 1, day 2 draft capital. How much does that factor into it? But it's so hard to say because, people knock Joe Burrow for that because he had Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, but look where Joe Burrow is now. So Michael Penix Jr., currently he's anywhere from quarterback 3 to quarterback 5 for me. And I think he's going to have a very nice NFL career ahead of him.
Yeah, I have him at quarterback 4 currently right now. Like I liked him. I like what I was able to watch on film there. I like the upside he offers with the arm. I love quarterbacks that have a big arm for the NFL. I just feel like that's
so Joe Milton is your quarterback 1?
Maybe we'll get to that. Maybe you'll find out soon enough. But yeah, like I said, deep ball accuracy is there, and I also love that in a quarterback. The arm strength, like I mentioned already, pocket presence is what's fantastic. Watching that on film, there, he's a smart guy. He's overcome a lot in his college career, going from coming over to Washington now and being able to produce at a high level. There's not much to say. I mean, you guys kind of said a lot of it already. That's kind of why I go last. But yeah, there's nothing that the dislike is what you guys already said. I mean, age, history, the ACLs, the experience with lefty quarterbacks is definitely just an overall, like, how many lefty quarterbacks really thrive at the NFL level there. But yeah, I mean, Michael Penix is someone I do like. If he lands in the right situation, like Minnesota, Denver, I like him there. I think he has a chance to really succeed at the next level. So, all right, boys, let's get over to the next quarterback here. Jaden Daniels, LSU quarterback here. This was another transfer here, but we'll start with his 23 stats here. 72% completion percentage, 3,800 passing yards, 40 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 1,100 rushing yards, something that all fantasy owners love to see. So, Dan, Jaden Daniels, tell us about him.
Whoa, my, a multi-school transfer prospect that had great weapons. Hold that thought because we're going to hear it one more time. So in my final scouting report for Jaden Daniels, I had, as a runner, Jaden Daniels plays like he is a teenager who just got the keys to his father's Accord. The world is an open road and he can go as fast as he wants, but he has no idea the consequences of the way he's driving. He's so good with this car, but the only lesson he's going to learn is when he eventually gets into an accident. And you watch Jaden Daniels run, and I feel like that is just exactly the way he's running. Even at the SEC level, he was able to athlete some defenders, which is no small feat because the SEC is, almost peak of college football. Sorry, Texas Tech fans. But that's something that won't hold true when you get to the NFL level because everyone's bigger, everyone's faster, everyone's better athletes. You can't out-athlete people, unless you're Lamar Jackson. But Jaden Daniels is by no means a prospect like Lamar Jackson. The LSU offense rarely attacked the middle of the field, but with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. there, you didn't really have to attack the middle of the field. So it's not a question of can he not do it. It's just he was never asked to do it, which is something that I'm going to bring up with another prospect in a little bit, that kind of mantra. Daniels doesn't have the best arm in the class, and his age isn't working for him. This is a common theme in this class as we are seeing the effects of COVID, the new transfer portal rules, and NIL money come to a steed with multiple 5th and 6th year player quarterback prospects. Daniels, I think, will have a Teddy Bridgewater type career. A team that drafts him may struggle to give him a second contract, but he will have a long, successful NFL career. It might not just be for one team, and it might not be as a full-time starter the entire time. But let's not forget, Teddy Bridgewater was really good before his injury. So I'm not wishing injury on anybody else. But if he doesn't clean up the way he runs, then I hate to say it, his career is going to be a lot shorter than it should be.
Yeah, that was definitely one thing that I have concerns with. Coach Tyler, how do you feel about Daniels? Like him, love him, hate him?
I've got Daniels at my 3 right now. Kind of like Dan said, he just kind of runs freely, and sometimes it's really good, and sometimes it's really bad. One of my favorite videos on Twitter is just a highlight tape of Jaden Daniels getting blown up by different defenders, and then there's all these little Sonic coins that pop out of him that are edited in every time he gets hit. And that's really the concern going into the league. We've seen multiple years of production. Obviously, this year he had his most outstanding of them all, 3,800 passing yards, 40 touchdowns through the air, 1,100 on the ground with 10 more touchdowns. He had the weapons around him. He was finally solidified in that offense. But we've seen, 2,900 passing yards from him in 2019, over 2,000. It wasn't outstanding, just under 2,400 in 2021, right before his transfer, and then 2,900 in 2022. He is a guy that I do worry about durability, not for the fact that he's a running quarterback, but for the fact that he's a running quarterback who is 210 pounds. We've got some receivers that are outweighing him this draft, but he's a guy that has shown that he can make plays at an elite level, but he's made plays at an elite level surrounded by elite playmakers. And so it's one of those, we're going to see if the weapons really made the man or not. Obviously, he had some success at Arizona State, saw greener pastures at LSU, and obviously ended up with a Heisman this year because of it. But we do have, Malik Neighbors, who's projected to be, top 8, top 10 receiver. I've seen people saying that scouts have him as their number 1 receiver off the board. And then you've got Brian Thomas, who's being projected anywhere from about 15 to 32, kind of solidified in that first round. He just had, I would say, possibly the most talent around him skill player wise of the quarterbacks that we're talking about today, just with the fact of those 2 receivers. But I do worry about durability. There is a little bit of the deep throw, he just doesn't have the weight and the turn to get the balls as accurately deep as you would want. We see a lot with Brian Thomas just outrunning guys, but there's some of those throws that were missed. And so I see, the little frame, the slender frame mixed with the couple misses that we have on the deep balls and kind of that lack of being able to drive the ball overly downfield. We don't need him to throw it 70 yards. It'd be really cool if he did. But I have him as my 3. Obviously we're talking fantasy. If he runs like he did this past year in the NFL, then he's going to be a great product for fantasy owners. And, I had Anthony Richardson at my quarterback 3 last year, who was the running quarterback of that top tier. And we saw what happened to him. And that dude is a tank. And so, obviously a little bit different play styles, but if we're banking on the rushing ability, and we saw what happened to, a 230, 240 pound quarterback doing that, what's going to happen to the 210 pound quarterback doing that?
Yeah, no, I like that, guys. That was a great breakdown, Jaden Daniels. I have him as my QB3 right now. I mean, again, the thing that sticks out is the athletic ability. I mean, if we were strictly talking passing, he might not be my QB3, but the way that this NFL world works nowadays, some of these quarterbacks now do have that dual threat ability that we love, and he needs to go into the right situation that a team is going to build around him, and that ability that he offers in the running game there. If they don't, things might not go his way. Like the Ravens did a great job building around Lamar Jackson the way they wanted to do that. The way the Bears did it with Justin Fields, not the same, unfortunately. Things obviously didn't work out with that situation there. So it really will be important where he lands at the NFL there, because, I think he was pretty decent when I saw him film on his deep ball, but, on the shorter passes, things could be less than desirable. The rushing ability was there. Love to see that there. Pocket presence, be able to escape out of the pocket, be able to throw on the run. Loved all that there. But there's definitely things about his game that needs to be improved. And some of it, unfortunately, is his size, that you can't really improve that in just 1 year. You can try, obviously, but it will take time to get there. And, if he rushes to the point where he's doing it like I saw in film and just taking hits after hit, he's not going to last very long at the NFL level. But he's got a tremendous talent. That's why I have him at 3. I think the upside of his dual threat play makes me really love him as a prospect. But again, he's definitely not a complete prospect, and he definitely will need to be coached and put in the right situation at the NFL level. All right.
Isn't it funny that, we talked about how he had such like great playmakers at LSU, and you look a lot of mock drafts right now and they have him going to the Patriots. Like, is there like a bigger 180 in situations, from going to that LSU offense to what New England is putting on the field this year?
It's going to be so bad.
We're going to see if the talent made the man or not for sure there.
I mean, if he goes to the
Exactly.
Patriots, I really don't want to draft him as much, but it's that rushing ability. That's the key right there. But if he's rushing for 1,100 yards in a season, I mean, that's great. But obviously, there's a lot more than just rushing at the NFL level in fantasy. So, all right, next up on the board, Drake May, UNC quarterback here. Last season, 63% completion percentage, 3,600 yards, 24 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Another 400 yards on the ground, 9 rushing touchdowns. My quarterback won the class here, but I'll let you guys go first. Please break down Drake May, Dan. How do you feel about Drake May?
All right, so I'll start off. My quarterback too. So Steve, what I'm about to say, listen to me saying he's my quarterback too before I get into this. All right, so my final scouting report was Drake May is not a finished product, but he has the physical traits and abilities to be a top 10 quarterback in the league with the right coach. In that way, he's similar to Josh Allen, but I think he is a better prospect than Josh was when Josh was coming out back in 2018. His consistency is what consistently holds him back. One play, he will rope a seam route, middle field close, like defense doesn't matter, and he'll just put it in a box on the guy. And the next play, he will throw a screen pass at his running back's feet, and it's back and forth, hot and cold, hot and cold. JT O'Sullivan actually put it best, I think, last week in one of his videos. He says, if he's such a good quarterback, then how come he doesn't play quarterback good? May will unfortunately be drafted high enough that there will be pressure to start him early, and that will be a mistake. A smart organization should sit him until at least the bye week before putting him out on the field. The recent hate must be because a lot of people are getting into his film and seeing the lowlights. But let's be honest, the NFL is a league of projections, and very few prospects have projected quite as well as Drake May. If I had to comp him to somebody, I think he honestly has a ceiling of like a Justin Herbert type of skill set. So, with that being said, is he going to land in Washington at 2? Is he going to land in New England at 3? Is somebody going to trade up? That I don't know, but I will know that you look at those teams' backup quarterbacks. Washington brought in Marcus Mariota. Patriots, they brought in Jacoby Brissett. I think wherever he lands, those should be the week 1 starters, and Drake should start on the bench and work with a coach on. It's not really a mechanics thing. It's not really like a footwork thing. I'm not well versed enough in throwing mechanics to say what it is exactly, but if you can fix that inconsistency, you have a top 10 quarterback in the league. But if you can't, then you're going to have the next Jameis Winston, it feels like.
I feel you. I like that. I like that breakdown. Coach Tyler?
Yeah. I have Drake May as my quarterback too. He was kind of the hope, and he was the guy I was hoping you had a quarterback one, or I'd be really confused with where you're going with it. But yeah, Drake May is he has all the potential in the world, but he's been too inconsistent in college to really put it all together. He shows these flashes of athleticism. He's one of those sneaky runners. He's not always going to get out of the pocket, but if he has to, he can get it done. He's athletic enough. He is still kind of that slender frame, 6'4". I think he weighed in 223 at the combine or pro day. But that like lower 220s, it could bump up through offseason stuff. But just the inconsistency, like Dan was talking about, there's some throws that you look at him and you're like, this guy could be the number 1 quarterback in the draft. And then you look at other throws where he's throwing screen passes to his running back's feet, and you're like, how is this guy a Division I quarterback? And it is very much on the team that drafts him to develop him. I look at it as the last UNC, obviously we had Sam Howell. We're going to kind of push him out of the mind. But the last UNC quarterback that I think of that had the allure that Drake May has was Mitch Trubisky. And he was, the guy, he was kind of the darling of, he has all the potential in the world, but you just got to do something with it. And we saw how that has happened for his career. And so kind of going off of what Dan said, he's got to end up in the right system and he's got to end up with the right coaches that know how to develop him. Because if you throw him out there week one and just play him for the 4/5 years of his rookie contract, then you're throwing him to the wolves and hoping you get a warrior out. Maybe he'll come out and be this star and he'll have everything figured out and he'll work with, all the quarterback gurus and become the stud top 10 quarterback. Or
he's going to be.
Yeah, hopefully. Or you see him go out there and, he still hasn't figured out the timing of where he needs to be and how much quicker the NFL is going to move than the ACC defenses that he's been playing against for the past couple of years. And I think it's going to catch up to him if he isn't in the right place. If Washington's that place, he's got weapons around him to where he has the ability to sort of be propped up a little bit with guys like Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson. And if Brian Robinson is really that guy for them in the backfield, he has the ability, he has the potential, but are we giving magic beans to a team or are we going to get the beanstalk out of it?
I like that. See, I like Drake May a lot. Well, what I watched on film, I saw like a close to Justin Herbert kind of comparison to some extent there. When Justin Herbert was coming out, everyone had their knocks on Justin Herbert, what he's able to do on the field. Yeah, he had a big arm and everything like that, but people consistently were like, there's something about Justin Herbert they didn't like. And I feel like a lot of people are doing that with Drake May personally. I like the arm. I like the accuracy that he offers on the field there. There are things that, I get it. There are definitely issues, dealing with post-snap reads, when things kind of go off the rails for him. You see the struggles that he kind of offers on the offense there, the turnovers, 16 interceptions this past season here. You don't want to see that from your quarterback, especially a quarterback coming in as a rookie here. I think you guys are right. He probably should sit. He should sit a little bit in a general sense. I think he will be able to play his rookie year and thrive and do well and kind of surprise a lot of people. He's got enough athletic ability to run the ball when needed on the field there. He can make those tight window throws. He can make the throws on all three levels of the defense there. And again, you go back and watch the film. I just like what I saw out of him. Again, the part of the reason why I liked him, I feel like he fits the mold of a more, prototypical quarterback that I like to see on the NFL field personally there compared to Caleb Williams. Again, Caleb Williams is fantastic. I understand why he's number one to basically everyone besides my own self there. But what I was able to see from Drake May is that I see that Justin Herbert kind of comparison in him. And hopefully he goes to Washington. I really don't want to see him go into New England. Maybe if Minnesota jumps up, that'd be great. But, he's likely to go to the Commanders there. And again, I think the offense is built well enough for him to be able to succeed, whether it's week one or, after the bye or whenever he starts his rookie year. But again, I like him. I like UNC quarterbacks because I had Sam Howell as my QB1 when he was coming out of his class. So there's something about them I just like for some reason.
Nobody should have been QB1 that class. I skipped.
Well, to be honest, I think Brock Purdy wasn't.
Brock's the best.
I was like, who was the best quarterback in that class? Was it Sam Howell? Did Sam Howell do the best so far? But I forgot Mr. Brock Purdy is in that class. So, all right, going on for the next quarterback here, JJ McCarthy out of Michigan. McCarthy last season here, 72% completion percentage, 2,900 yards, 22 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, another 200 yards on the ground. Coach Tyler, go ahead and go talk about McCarthy.
Yeah, McCarthy is, if he's not one of the biggest risers in the entire draft, he's definitely who I would say has probably been the biggest riser in terms of quarterbacks throughout this offseason. He's a guy that I like. He's not a guy that I love. He has that experience at Michigan. Obviously, they won a lot of games, so everyone's going to tout him as this winner, right? But they won a lot of games behind Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards and their run game, right? McCarthy was able to show up sometimes whenever he was needed, but he wasn't airing the ball out to where I'm seeing a ton. He was in a very pro style offense, what Harbaugh is going to bring ideally or sort of projected like to the Chargers. But he was in an offense where it wasn't necessarily on him to win. And sometimes that can be really good. And sometimes that can sort of shock him if he walks into a situation like LA and, the Chargers go crazy and do something, or he walks into a situation where he doesn't have these elite running backs around him. I've seen a lot of talk that the Vikings are going to move up and try and draft McCarthy, right? You obviously get Justin Jefferson, best receiver in the league, and you get a coach that was an offensive coordinator that can work with you in O'Connell, but you're also walking into a team that doesn't have a running back solution. Maybe Aaron Jones is really that guy, but he comes from a team where it was a very running back heavy offense. Now, when he did have to throw the ball, he did look good, right? There's a lot of talk of he didn't have the arm strength. He didn't able to put any zip on the ball. And then he went out at the combine, and I want to say he threw, they pulled out the radar gun, see like how fast you throw on these balls. And I think he threw either the same speed or 1 mile an hour less than big arm talent Joe Milton, right? He threw, 63, 64 miles an hour. So he can put the speed on the ball when he needs to. I understand the rise in the draft stock. I understand the rise of the draft capital of what's at least being projected, especially with teams that might not have Penix as high as some people on their draft boards. He is projected to get at least top 4, if not, top 8 draft capital. Teams are either going to move up or move down. We don't know how those trades are going to shake out, but he's a guy that's going to get the draft capital. He does have that history of winning and being able to command an offense, even if he isn't the exact focal point of that offense. And he's a guy that has the ability to, roll out of the pocket and make some throws. He has the ability to stand in there and get receivers the ball when it's necessary. Now, he's not going to go out and win you a game on his own. I don't think he's going to be the next Tom Brady coming out of Michigan. But he's someone that I think is going to be a viable quarterback. And I think one of the reasons that he's being sort of projected to Minnesota is he just has that winner's aura about him. And that's what teams want, right? They don't want guys who are going out and going 500 every year. And that could be team-based. That could be coach-based. We'll see what Michigan looks like this next season without Harbaugh. But he's a quarterback that can make the throws. There's some things that he could mature and develop on that he didn't get a ton of work on in college, but he is coming out of a pro-style offense, but an offense that I felt was very running back based. We talked about the tread on the tires of Blake Corum and how they're kind of running bald, but he can make the throws that need to be made. And I think that I have him at my quarterback 4. I think that that's probably the most ideal spot to put him unless someone shocks us with picks 2 or 3. But he's solidified at my 4. I have bought in enough to move him up that high, but I don't think that he's going to move any higher than that for me.
That's fair. I like that. Dan, how do you feel about McCarthy?
All right, so McCarthy's interesting. I wrote down McCarthy is a prime example of the mantra, lack of opportunity doesn't implicate a lack of skill. Just because we haven't seen somebody do something doesn't mean they can't do it. Like Tyler said, he wasn't asked to do a whole lot on that Michigan team. That Wolverines team went undefeated this year. They had star players all over the place, so JJ didn't have to do a lot. But when he did have to do stuff, it looked promising. It looked good. He's reading the field. He's got a little bit of issues with, but the team worked around that. He's a very raw prospect, which is, he's young. So it reflects that. This class is funny because we got, 24, 25-year-old prospects. And you got, JJ McCarthy, who just turned 21 not too long ago. Now, the thing that I said before is the NFL is a projection-based league. That change happened, maybe 10 years ago, probably a little bit before Mahomes came and hit the league, and GMs and front offices realized like you cannot win unless you have the quarterback. So 15, 20 years ago, JJ McCarthy is like the perfect quarterback. You take, day two, he's got to sit for a year. He's got to learn. He's got to, learn to become a quarterback and mature, and he'll do it on the bench. Now, unfortunately, with the way the NFL works nowadays, prospect like that goes as a top 10 pick, see a Zach Wilson a few years ago. So McCarthy is going to be overdrafted. I think he's going to be drafted way too high because it's everyone's, chasing the rainbow, basically, when you talk about, landing a Patrick Mahomes, landing a Justin Herbert, landing a Josh Allen. So I hope wherever he goes, kind of like May, he sits. But when, like May, I want to see on the field year one. McCarthy, I don't want to see on the field year one. I like draft him, don't even put him on shoulder pads on Sundays. Like, just get him in the building and teach him how to be an adult, teach him how to be a quarterback. The problem is there's not a lot of teams in the league right now that have the patience for that. GMs get fired way too quickly. And when a general manager drafts a quarterback, their timetables are kind of linked together and the clock starts ticking. So I really hope whoever takes him has the gumption to sit him for a year and let him develop and learn. Otherwise we might see something similar to a Zach Wilson situation where the kid's just thrown on the field way too early and never gets a chance to develop. That being said, I personally wouldn't take him in the top 15 picks. He would be the type of quarterback I would trade into the back of the first round to grab that fifth-year option for. And then that way, that year on the bench isn't costing you quite as much. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen. He's going to be a top 10 selection. And at that point, I just pray to God that there's a veteran quarterback in front of him that the team will rely on for a full season.
Yeah, McCarthy is definitely going to be an interesting prospect wherever he lands. It almost seems like one of these teams that want to make a run at the playoffs there, the Broncos, the Vikings, the Raiders, these teams that don't want to just start over fresh. They want that quarterback to keep going. Is going to put McCarthy in an interesting situation to see if he can step up early on in his career, which, again, like you said, Dan, I would prefer him to sit personally there. I think there are some things that there's still mystery about him that I don't trust him to go on the field day one. Again, he has that leadership field general mentality to him that I like, kind of gets the ball down in the middle of the field there, really good, great accuracy in that sense. But, doing more, bringing an offense to another level, that's something that I still want to see out of him. He didn't do that. Have to do that as much at Michigan, but can he do it? That's still something I want to see over him. He's my QB 5. I think he's an interesting prospect, but I'm not sure that he can uplift an offense. I feel like he's going to be in a situation where, similar to Brock Purdy, where he needs to be in a good offense to be able to thrive for what he's able to do on the field. All right, so let's go over to the promos of the day here. Obviously, Dynasty Nerds is something that we promo every single week here. Obviously, a lot of us use their film room to do a lot of studying on all these prospects here. So if you want access to that and the Dynasty Nerds GM, a fantastic tool for your Dynasty needs, just use our promo code COACH, and you'll be helped out over there. And of course, obviously, Did It, a company that I work with, talking fantasy football on a more of a one-on-one basis there, live, where you can kind of show off your team and kind of get real fantasy advice from many people in the industry here, someone like me as well. And it's a great app to have. We used it a lot in the in season there, and I've been using it a little bit more now that rookie drafts are starting to heat up in the next month or two. I expect to hear a lot more faces over there. So just tune into that. You can just download on the app or the Play Store, wherever you use kind of phone you guys have. So, all right, next up, Bo Nix. Bo Nix out of Oregon here. Last season, 77% completion percentage, 4,500 yards, 40 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, another 234 rushing yards on the ground. Coach Tyler, how do you feel about Bo Nix? Actually, no, Dan, how do you feel about Bo Nix?
So actually, this is a nice transition because, we just talked about, McCarthy being drafted too early. And, you guys mentioned a team like Denver, a team that can make a playoff push. Are they going to make the mistake of grabbing McCarthy? And that's just the wrong pairing. Well, Bo Nix is the right pairing. Bo Nix is one of the few prospects in the class that I think is plug and play week one. And that has a lot to do with, his history. So for my scouting report, I wrote, Feels like Bo Nix has been playing college football forever, but that will happen when you start right away as a true freshman at a major school in the SEC that is on TV all the time. A privilege that some will say was due to family ties. You can just ask Malik Willis about that. Over his 5 years as a player at 2 separate schools, Nix has improved tremendously. A common trend in this class, Penix, Daniels, how much weapons played a part in that. But these are also the guys who switch schools, so that's kind of like the general theme for those older prospects is switching schools, and are they elevated by those offensive pieces around them? Physically, Nix lacks the arm to make most NFL throws, and he will limit the toolbox of the play caller on whatever team he lands on. He does compensate that with some mobility, but there are others in this class who do that better, like Jaden Daniels, for example. Nix has the ability to be a starter right away, but he might not be worth a top 15 draft pick. Desperation by quarterback-needy teams could lead to him being overdrafted. I do have confidence in him starting right away. So basically, my summary with Nix is, I think because he's worked in so many different systems and he's played for so long, he can start right away week 1. Now, what are you getting right away week 1? You're getting, replacement level quarterback play, which for some teams that might be enough to put them over the bump. Denver is a team that I kind of peg for Bo Nix, but honestly, I don't think anybody knows what Sean Payton is thinking right now. For all we know, Sean Payton going to trade for Trey Lance, next week. But out of all the quarterbacks besides Caleb, and Penix, he's probably the one that I feel most comfortable starting week 1 in the NFL.
Coach Tyler, how do you feel about Bo Nix?
Yeah, kind of like Dan said, we got to kind of see Bo Nix grew up before our eyes. I talked about going back to high school recruiting and thinking about all that. 5-star quarterback coming out of Alabama, ended up at Auburn. And, he didn't overly impress a bunch of people that freshman year. 18-year-old kid walking in there. He still had, 2,500 passing yards and 16 touchdowns. But we've got to see him grow and mature. And as the starter that he's been, we've seen him steadily get better and better and better up to the point of 4,500 yards this year and 45 touchdowns. And obviously he's one of those guys that we talked about. The talent around him was not bad talent at all, right? We have Bucky Irving back in the backfield with him. We have Troy Franklin out wide. We have Tez Johnson. Fun story with that, with him being his adopted brother, transferring to Oregon and playing in that offense with him as a receiver. He's just a guy that has continually grown, as we talked about, sort of the age disparity of, we've got some really young quarterbacks coming out of this draft and some, I don't want to say really old, but older quarterbacks coming out of this draft. He is one of those guys that, you hand him the reins if he walks in on day 1 and you don't have anyone in front of him, and you feel comfortable of, this is a guy that can progress and continue to get better. Obviously, there's some things that we need to see more out of him. His decision-making still can be a little bit shoddy. There's some arm talent that's left to be desired in terms of controlling where he's placing the ball. But at the same time, he's grown enough from what we remember seeing back. It feels like Dan said, it feels like he's been playing forever. I feel like I've been watching that dude for a decade. But back from what we've seen him mature enough to where we've seen a steady growth that we could only imagine if he ends up with an organization that is not terrible at developing their quarterbacks and their players, that we'll continue to see that growth year by year. And it might take a year or two before he's this acclaimed NFL starter. But if he continues to mature the way that he has and that we've seen over the past 5 years of him in college, then it may be an instant thing. It most likely won't be. But you give him a year or two and he can work his way up into being that starter for a team.
I like it. So yeah, I like Bo Nix. I like what I watched on film. I see him as like the next generation of Gardner Minshew. Personally, there, I feel like he's got some some decent traits to him. He's someone that I think will be eventually, honestly, a career backup who, goes in there and does enough for an NFL team there. He might have opportunities to start once again because I think he's got some decent traits to him. And I feel like he's very accurate with the football, obviously there. I mean, he's got a toughness to him that I think fits better as a backup quarterback. I don't know. There's just a lot of things I just don't like about him. The footwork, progressing on the field as a processor there. Loves to stare down his, wide receivers a lot. When I saw the deep ball wasn't really there a lot. I feel like he works better on quick reads and rather than just sitting in the pocket too long and having to go through everything there. I think getting the ball out of his hands works a lot quicker for him than having to wait for a play to develop. I don't know. It was okay with him. I wasn't overly impressed with Bo Nix personally. I think you guys are right. I think he ends up, unfortunately, there's a good chance he ends up as a late first round picks because the team might want to bring him in and see if they can develop him the right way. But I really just don't think he is going to be a guy that hits the NFL level in the positive way. But
yeah, he's a guy. I don't know if we talked ranking. He's a guy I have at my 6, so he's not a guy that I'm like overly eager to draft. But he's a guy that if he falls into my lap in a draft in the right spot, I'm happy taking him just because we know what he can grow into. But he's not a guy that I'm going to actively seek out and chase, right? If I'm in position, middle, late, third round where I'm sitting there and all the other quarterbacks have gone and I've got a spot on my taxi that can wait and develop, he's a guy that I'm happy to go get at that point, but I'm not going to chase Bo Nix. Bo Nix is going to chase me to be on my team.
He's kind of be like Aiden O'Connell for me last year, where I really liked Aiden O'Connell, but I obviously wasn't going to go out of my way to get him. But if he fell in my lap at the right spot in my rookie drafts, I'm going to take my shot on him because there is definitely something there, but I don't see the franchise upside that some people may see out of him. And I think he's like my QB. He's my QB 7. So, all right. Next on the board here, Spencer Rattler, South Carolina. Of course, I lost my stats here. Here we go. Last season, 2023, 68% completion percentage, 3,100 yards, 19 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and 104 yards on the ground here. Coach Tyler, how do you feel about Spencer Rattler?
Yeah, so going back to recruiting, talked about Bo Nix being the number 2 quarterback in his class, 5-star. Number 1 quarterback in the nation was Spencer Rattler, right? Coming out of Arizona. And he was going to Oklahoma with this great offensive recruiting class. I was living in the DFW Metroplex at the time, and there were multiple guys coming out of there that would go on to be with him at Oklahoma. And it was supposed to just be this star-studded offense. And we saw a little bit of that when he took over in 2020, right? We know the COVID season, how things played out with that, but still 3,000 yards, 28-7 on touchdowns, and then 160 yards on the ground, 6 touchdowns. Not a lot of running, but a lot of touchdowns out of that. And then we go into 2021, right? And he had started the year a little bit slower, and he wasn't getting it done in the Red River rivalry. And that's when we start to see the emergence of the quarterback 1 that we have in this draft class, quarterback 2 for Steve with Caleb Williams, right? And we see Rattler sort of take that back seat. And it's this guy who was supposed to be the star, number 1 in the class. He's going to be in this great offense with Lincoln Riley, who's just able to develop all the quarterbacks. And we had to see him kind of get brought back down to earth. And after Caleb Williams had secured that spot post Joe Burrow and the emergence of the transfer portal, we see him go to South Carolina, where he didn't have outstanding years, but he didn't have bad statistical years, right? We have a little bit with the turnovers, but we see 3,000 yards, over 3,000 passing yards in both years, 18 and 19 touchdowns. We do see 20 combined interceptions there, so a little bit of turnover growth, not in the good way. And then we see, 7 combined rushing touchdowns, not a ton on the ground there from this guy that was supposed to be, for the most part, a dual threat quarterback. I have him as my 7, or no, I have him as my 8, quarterback 8 for this draft class. The move wasn't a bad move for him to go to Carolina or South Carolina, but he just kind of fell from grace as that star number one that he was supposed to be. And we saw the tables sort of flip with him and Caleb Williams and what, if you look back at what Debbie was and what all these early projections were for like the 2023 quarterback class in the draft, Spencer Rattler was supposed to be that number one overall pick. And he's supposed to be developed and be awesome. And we see a little bit of those turnover-worthy plays on top of the actual turnovers that he has. We see a little bit of decision-making and lack of quick decision-making. And he is just sort of sitting in that underdeveloped area where he had all the talent in the world and he just ended up not being what everyone thought he was going to be. And there's swings and misses all the time in high school to college recruiting and college to the NFL scouting. And he's not a guy that I want to say was a complete swing and a miss, but he's definitely not where anyone thought he would be. So I have him down at my 8. He's not a guy I'm overly excited to get through the draft. He might be one of those waiver wire ads post-draft, but he's going to be a guy that teams are going to go for, and he's going to be a backup unless someone just really believes in him. But he's going to be a backup, if not lower on a depth chart, at least starting out. He's a guy that I could see as one of those career backup guys who's constantly fighting for those spots to try and get up and kind of showcase what he has. But at the same time, I don't think he's going to be an overly viable fantasy asset.
I like that. Dan, how do you feel about Rattler?
So I have written down that Spencer is proof that arm talent will keep you relevant for quite a long time. It's chasing that drug that I was talking about before. Like scouts, front offices, coaches, they see that arm talent. They say, oh, I can fix this. I can work with this. And from what I've heard in, the scouting world is that the NFL is a lot higher on Spencer Rattler than media likes to lead on. And don't be surprised when Spencer is like a day 2 pick, basically. My favorite place to mock Spencer Rattler right now is the New York Giants. Kind of like a rookie that you don't have to invest the number 6 overall pick, but it gives you an alternate option to Daniel Jones that isn't Drew Lock, that has some potential. Is Spencer Rattler fixable? I don't know. I don't have the answer for that, but I know there's going to be coaches and front offices that look at that arm talent and say, if we can fix this, we are onto something. So for that reason, don't be surprised when Spencer goes day 2 and is a lot more relevant in the conversation of roster talks next season.
Yeah, I like it, guys. I mean, again, I like the arm talent. I guess I'm another person who just can't get over arm talent and what he's able to do on the field there. But again, there's definitely things when you watch on film, very reckless with the ball at times. He's a shorter guy, very inconsistent, bad reads at times, played very inconsistent throughout his college career. But again, the arm talent is there. He's got playmaking. I think he's got a playmaking ability to his game. To some extent there. I think the ball placement's there, good release, accurate for the most part. But again, there's a lot of discipline that he needs to go through if he's going to be able to have any chance at the NFL level. I have him at 6, I think 6 or 7. But yeah, there's definitely some coaching that he needs to get done if he's going to ever make it at the NFL level. All right. And then we have one player each left here. We're going to talk about individual players and we're going to get out of here. So first up here, Michael Pratt from Tulane. Dan, this was your guy. Talk about Pratt.
Tulane, don't disrespect my boy Tajay Spears. All right, so Michael Pratt is going to be a very good NFL backup quarterback. He's a high IQ type of quarterback. He's very smart. He understands the offense he's working in. He is just limited physically when it comes to both, hand size, arm strength, kind of the whole package. I would equate him to almost like what Jacob Browning was last year for the Bengals. He's the type of guy where if your starter goes down, he can come in and win you a spot game or two, but he's not going to elevate the team. If you have a great play caller, if you have good weapons, Michael Pratt will get the job done. And we're seeing how valuable that is to NFL teams nowadays with so many starting quarterbacks going down with injuries. I think last year was like a record for that. The backup quarterback is becoming just so much more important. And now you see Carson Wentz going for $3 million. Like you see these more expensive veteran backups being signed, but Michael Pratt is the type of kid that you can go get late day 2, early day 3, and you're paying him a 6-figure salary to serve as your backup. So I think Michael Pratt is going to be a great career backup. And then if you want to talk about fantasy football, he's going to be a waiver wire darling a handful of times, depending on what team he lands on.
I like it. All right. My number 8 guy here was Joe Milton from Tennessee here. Again, if you don't know who Joe Milton is, man is a rocket of an arm, but has literally no accuracy or ball placement to him. The reason I put him at 8 because I feel like an NFL team will buy into him and say, hey, this is a guy we could put as a project and see what he's able to do with good coaching and working on fixing his mechanics and just overall ability as a quarterback. I also see him doing like a Logan Thomas and being a tight end in 3 years from now. But he has the big arm. Like he has the size of an NFL quarterback. He wants 6'5", 235. He's got a nasty whip on the ball. But again, there are issues with ball placement, accuracy, things like that there. Obviously, his stats don't show the whole story. Obviously, only 20 touchdowns, 2,800 yards this past season after playing 5 years in college there. Again, he's an older prospect, so his time in the NFL will be very limited if he can't seem to figure out, kind of like Logan Thomas is. He was I think, older prospect coming in too, to some extent, if I'm not mistaken. But again, Joe Milton has some upside to him with his arm, but the rest of it needs to be worked on. I wanted to throw him here at a number 8 because I wanted to talk about him real quick so you guys know who he is in case he does land in a situation. It's like, oh, okay, well, we'll see how that works out there. So
Joe Milton to me is Anthony Richardson with a lot less rushing ability and a lot less draft hype. That's how I view him a little bit.
I like that comparison.
Tim and I on our show, we actually came up with a perfect spot for Joe Milton. With that emergency third quarterback option, you have a designated Hail Mary specialist.
I like that.
And you just bring him in, end of the game. You need an 80-yard bomb. There's your guy, Joe.
I like that. Why take the 60-yard field goal? Just put Joe Milton, let him air it downfield. He'll make it. All right, and last but not least, Jordan Travis from FSU. Coach Tyler, this was your guy here. Go quickly talk about Travis.
Yeah, he's a guy that I do think is going to be a backup in the league, partially because of just his size and just the length of his career, but not the overall success of his career. Of a couple years of great production, partially because he was playing full-time starter. But we have the gruesome leg injury, the whole reason that Florida State was kept out of the college football playoff, which with no Jordan Travis, it's a good thing they were kept out of the college football playoff. We saw how that offense looked. But he's a guy that I think is going to be able to go in as a backup. There's some things that he needs to develop with his timing on his throws and his progressions. But he's a guy that we've seen have some success in the league, and he's able to I see his arm as sort of like a pitcher's arm, right? Like he knows when he needs to get a fastball out, and he knows when he can sort of lob that curveball in there and drop it in over someone. And so we have the arm talent, but we do have the leg injury that's, we're going to see when he's back. We're going to see when he's 100%. But he's not a guy that's going to go in and take over a quarterback one position immediately, if ever. But he's not a guy that's going to go in and take over a quarterback one position immediately because he's not healthy enough to right now. So I think teams are going to be able to take that injury and drop him down a couple rounds and still walk away with the guy that's going to be a viable backup for them. He is on the smaller side. We're looking at 6'1", 200. So not overly tall, not overly big, but he's a guy that we've seen have success. He did have some pretty decent receivers in Keon Coleman, and I'm forgetting the Johnny Wilson, but also I feel like if I was throwing to someone who was 6'7", I could probably throw for a couple 100 yards too. But he's a guy, I'm just looking at the quarterbacks that are left I think the Florida State tag is going to be a good one for him to have when we're looking through quarterbacks, like possibly guys from Tulane or something. If we're fighting over that and they have them graded the same, they might take Travis just because of the name and level he was playing at over something like a Power 5. But at the same time, he's going to come in at least to OTAs and possibly the preseason injured. And so they know they're not getting this immediate guy that they can plug into their depth chart. They're playing the long game, but they're also playing the long game with a, possibly late day 2, but most likely day 3 pick where they're just kind of throwing darts at the board. And, if he sticks, it's great for them. If not, they don't have a ton invested in him if he doesn't come back extremely healthy or come back dominant.
Sounds like a Seattle move right there.
It'd be a great behind Gina.
But that is going to wrap up our show tonight, guys. We hope you guys appreciate our quarterback breakdowns. I know we all enjoyed it. Dan, my friend, always love having you on the show here. If there's anything you want to say before you get going, the floor is yours, my friend.
I always love coming on the Fantasy Coaches Show. It's always a good time, especially during the pre-draft process, talking about prospects. If you want some more of my positional rankings and quarterback prospects, I have a brand new show. It's called Banners Fly Forever. You can check us out on YouTube at Banners Fly Forever or on Twitter at BFF_pod. So yeah, trying to grow a little following over there. But if you're not following these guys first, follow them first, and then head over and follow us.
Yeah, follow everybody. We always love that. Grow everybody. I love that. Coach Tyler, anything you want to say before we get going?
Yeah, go use code coach at Dynasty Nerds. Going through pre-draft season. The draft is coming up real soon. We got a couple weeks, and we're chomping at the bit for it, and I'm sure that y'all are too. So as much as you're watching us, you've got the all 22 film room you could have access to. If you're trying to value picks before or after they're happening in your draft, you've got the Dynasty GM to go in and see. If you're a trade calculator guy, got a great trade calculator. If you just want to see where your team stacks up against others and where you think that you can succeed and improve, Dynasty GM is great for that. And also we have all of our Dynasty Nerds rankings on there. So go to dynastynerds.com, use code coach, and have a good pre-draft process.
Thank you, Coach Tyler. And of course, thank you all for who tuned in tonight. We had a lot of views there. I love to see that always. Hopefully, you guys got some great information from these amazing analysts here talking about these prospects here, guys. Hopefully, it kind of helps you guys out, better understand them as we get closer to rookie draft season. Of course, we'll be back next week talking part 1 of our wide receiver / tight end room. And because the tight end room is not that deep, but we'll talk about that next week. And again, we'll be back next Monday, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, talking wide receivers and tight ends. So we thank you all for tuning in tonight, and have a good one, guys.
Back to back is not far-fetched.